Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here, and welcome to my review of the Sendy Audio Peacock. So this is, of course, Sendy Audio's flagship, and from what I understand, Sendy and Sivga are co-brands or sister concern of another, and Sendy is the flagship, the more higher end sort of line of Sivga Audio. So this is their flagship. This has been their flagship since 2021, or 2021 is essentially, 4 years ago now? So it's been around for a bit of time now, but I had never come across the Peacock until CanJam Singapore in April of 2025. So that caught my attention because it was being driven, I forget what it was driven by, but it sounded warm, lush, smooth, and bassy. And I was pretty curious to bring this in because I've seen reviews from other influencers and I see a pretty divided sort of a spectrum of opinions, because on the one hand, I've seen people saying that this is a terrible disaster. And on the other, people have said this is a godsend, and, others have praised it. So I was pretty interested as to, what I would feel about it if I had it in my home for a prolonged period of time. So that's basically where we're at. I'm going to share my views, hopefully as in unbiased a manner as possible. So in terms of build and comfort, because that's basically what I'll start with, I'll talk about build comfort aesthetics, and then I'll talk about sound. This is made out of wood, and it looks premium. That's just what it is. It does look premium. It's quad former technology, which is essentially the planar magnetic tech that they refer to it as. This is made out of pretty high quality, guys. I think that there are certain quirks though, but generally speaking, this sort of peacock pattern is, I think, pretty eye-catching. Of course, aesthetics are subjective. Some of you might find this to be a bit gaudy or showy or too flamboyant. Others will really dig this, but this is really nice work. And this looks nice to my subjective judgment. So see, I'm someone who used to find a lot of things gaudy when I was younger. Like I used to find even gold gaudy, yellow gold that is, but I don't anymore. I think I have a broader palette of what's tasteful or what I consider to be tasteful. This is nice, I think. It reminds me of Eastern artwork, if you know what I mean. You'll see a lot of brass work in East Asia, in South Asia as well, which this reminds me of. And the wood is it's not faux wood, it's natural wood. It has beautiful sort of wooden natural patterns to the wood. This, I think, is leather or faux leather. It's very plush, very comfortable. The cutouts are of a decent size. This has a bit of a cup swivel, and the clamp is not much. So I appreciate the sort of absence of clamp here. This is very, very comfortable. This sort of secondary strap, this comfort strap, and so this is metal. Of course, this is a bit of plastic. Overall, for aesthetics, I would say this is a good-looking headphone. For comfort, this is excellent, and for overall ergonomics and comfort, this is very, very good. Now to talk about sound. Overall, guys, this is not what this does not sound like what it graphs like. Now, I've seen graphs that look slightly different from each other, but overall, the graphs bear out a headphone that doesn't have pinna gain. Now, I perceive this to have pinna gain, and reasonably so. As a matter of fact, I would even go as far as to say substantially so, because on all the amplifiers I tried this with, the vocals were not, they were not recessed. They were not distant from me. So this is a classic case of I'm not exactly sure what's happening with the graphs that are out there. I don't have a measurement a system in my house, but this does not, overall, the way I would summarize this is that this is a dynamic, rich, sort of like a mid-bassy warmth and rich, upper mids forward headphone with some energy in the treble, almost W-shaped. Okay, so starting with the bass, I think the bass does roll off in the sub bass, but I don't perceive it. I think this is some of the best bass I've heard on a planar headphone at this price point. And I say that because I really enjoy drums. I've grown up around musicians, around live music, and the drums here sound awesome. They sound very dynamic driver-like. They remind me of the Focal Clear because they're punchy. There's growl. There's a lot of kick. There's impact. There's decay, and it sounds very, very nice. The transients in the bass are wonderful. It is. I mean, if you like drums and this sort of wallop of a kick drum, this sounds amazing. It hits hard. There's decay, and it just sounds very realistic. I've enjoyed Go-Go Penguin with this. I've enjoyed a bit of metal with this, heavy metal, with a bit of EQ to sort of tame the treble a bit. But overall, I would say the drums are fantastic on this, and it doesn't really sound like, the roll-off is not very perceptible. At least not on my chain. I was using this with the Mola Mola Tambaki DAC, which is, of course, a very good DAC, but I don't think it was the DAC. And I've used a variety of amps on this. But yeah, this was not something that I think ever bothered me in terms of sub-bass roll-off or what have you. I do think that's worth mentioning because if you just go by a graph, and I like going by graphs, guys, because a graph can help you EQ. A graph has it serves many other purposes. But I honestly did not find the bass to be lacking the way the graph would suggest, especially in sub-bass extension. Maybe that's just me. And even if there was a bit of a dearth, so to speak, of sub-bass, what this does is it more than makes up for the dearth of sub-bass by giving you a lot of slam and a lot of punch. Okay. To talk about mid-range, guys, the mid-range is overall very warm. It's lush. There's a bit of romanticism to it. And there is, I think, some resonance around, 1 kilohertz, which some people have talked about. And the mid-range is interesting because it's forward. I wouldn't say around the upper mids is the most natural sounding mid-range. There's something that's slightly off, right? There's a slight, ever so slight metallic timbre to the mid-range, which doesn't really come through on a lot of tracks, guys, I have to say. It doesn't come through on every track that I've played, but on a few it did. So I do understand people's gripes with the mid-range because, it's not ideal. It's not as, natural sounding as an HD600 would be. And although there is a lot of beautiful lower mids warmth to this, somehow when it comes to upper mids, there's a bit of this nasally sort of this quality to it. In terms of treble, guys, these are warm headphones. I mean, it's not a trebly headphone. I do think there's energy in the far reaches of upper treble in the air frequencies, which I think can be a bit much on certain tracks. On heavy metal and rock, I did have to tune it down a bit. There's a bit of energy in the sibilance range as well, around lower to mid treble. I can't exactly pinpoint what that frequency is, but around mid treble, guys, there is a bit of a sharpness which does come through in certain tracks, which I honestly didn't find very annoying. I thought it added to the sense of resolution and overall detail, and this does pair well with warmer tracks. Now, to talk about technical performance, guys, I was actually quite impressed. Like, I don't think it's at the same level as the Hyphaman Aria or a Sennheiser HD800S. Those headphones are still some of the most technical headphones, regardless of price. So I think that is what it is. But even the fact that I'm comparing them with these, legendary headphones, I think says a lot, because I think that this headphone is pretty impressive for resolution in particular. Like, I was able to hear things coming through on male vocals, like, inflections, nuances in the person's voice. That was pretty impressive. I was getting a sense of lower level signals in the staging and all that. Like, I think this is quite close to the Aria and the 800S in terms of resolution, but it's not really up there. So I think this is more comparable to Adunu Arashi. This has a resolution of like a $1,300 headphone or a $1,000 headphone, right? So if this was priced around $1,000 to $1,300, I think that would be a better sweet spot for what this sounds like in terms of resolution. Because a lot of you, tend to think that you pay for resolution when you go higher up the price point, and of course you often pay for slam or impact, and in some cases soundstage and imaging, of course. Soundstage here, because it's a bit airy and it sounds, wide-ish. It's not nowhere near as wide as, let's say, an Aria or an HD800S, but it's wider than a Focal Clear. It's similar to Focal Utopia, I think, in terms of width. It's not very wide, but the images are impressive. The images are pretty present and pretty, in your face. and have a good amount of definition to the images, and they're well separated and all that. So I do appreciate what it does for imaging. Now, I do want to say that in terms of dynamics, it packs a punch. It's an extremely dynamic headphone. If you want a dynamic planar headphone at $1,500, honestly, I can't think of many options. So I do want to say that in terms of dynamics, it's impressive. It's a punchy headphone. If you look at certain tracks that go from being, let's say, louder to quieter or vice versa, this keeps up with those tracks exceedingly well. In other words, you get a sense of the gradations in volume between the loudest part of a song and the quietest part of a song very, very accurately and effectively. And I can't say enough about how dynamic this is. So if dynamism is your cup of tea, if that's what you look for in these headphones, this is a very dynamic headphone. Now, in terms of overall timbre, I think the timbre is fine. I would not say this is something that blew me away for timbre. I think it's warm and rich, but it's not as, I want to say, as accurate as most warm and rich headphones, which is, and I did pair this with, let's say, a warmer amp, and it sounded better, and I paired this with a neutral amp, and the timbre was just fine. You don't need a very powerful amplifier for this. This has a sensitivity of, I think, 103 decibels, so it's pretty easily driven. But just to keep in mind that it does, depend a bit on what amp you use if you want to get the most out of it in terms of its overall performance even, and not just timbre. So overall, for technical performance, guys, the resolution is quite decent, I think. It's, like I said, it's not really a $1,500 sort of worth resolution, if I may use that expression. It is like a $1,300, $1,200 sort of headphone in terms of resolution, especially comparable to the Dunu Arashi. And I think the slam and the dynamics are essentially its party trick, and it's beautiful and it's warm. So that's basically what this headphone is about, guys. So it does come very decently accessorized. By the way, it's not a very light headphone. I think it's around 500 grams. So keep that in mind. I do try to listen occasionally lying down because these headphones can become quite heavy. So that's what it is. But it's a very luxurious looking headphone, a warm headphone, and great dynamics. And if you want a planar headphone that's, has a bit of speed and dynamics and a lot of dynamics and resolution, this is possibly a great buy, especially if you can get it at closer to $1,300. Lastly, guys, this comes with those sort of leather, very distinctive leather carrying case that a lot of these Sendy audio headphones come with. The cable itself is a nice one. This has a branded wooden splitter, which is a nice sort of touch because they match. Engraved here, just the way, there's lettering here as well, engraved. The cable is pretty long, which I appreciated because this allows me to listen to this on my nightstand with my chain on my nightstand. It has a bunch of adapters, which is absolutely great. So you can use this either with this 4.4 mm jack or with its adapter that converts this into a single-ended 6.35, and you get another adapter that converts this into an XLR jack. So that's it, guys. I think this is a good headphone. I don't completely understand why this has been so divisive. It doesn't really sound completely like what it graphs like. That could be for a number of reasons. That could be because of, the fact that these pads are, they're not exactly, they sort of taper and then they, bulge towards the end. So it really depends on what sort of coupling you're able to get with the measurement rig. And of course, different rigs have different ways of showing treble, and there are variances, of course, but I'm not exactly sure why the upper mids came off as recessed for some people. The upper mids sound quite intimate to me. That's what it is. Overall, it's a good headphone. I think it's a beautiful headphone. It's a very dynamic headphone. It's got warmth, and if you EQ a bit, this can go from a good headphone to a pretty good headphone, is basically what I would say. So that's it for me, guys. I hope this review was useful. If this was, give this a like. Follow my channel if you're not following my channel already. And stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.